Mhm. Well, I think a lot of people are moving in the direction of should we worry about this, in the post-COVID era, So we need to take a look at the historical aspect to this. This has been happening on, the farms for a while. And this is a zoonotic kind of situation. There are things that are zoonotic. There are things that are made in laboratories that are accidentally released, and there are things that are purposely released. And everyone that listens to this show knows that I really focused on the bioweapons of beta coronaviruses and some other viruses. But in this case, this is H5N1. There's different types of influenza. There is swine flu, there's avian flu, there's human flu, there's different types of flus. And these mutations take place at these two different spike points on the surface of the virus. It's the H um, spike and the N spike. All right. And it's a resorted, it's a segmented genome. So there can be a reassortment and a mixing between H and N. That's how they get the numbers. Okay. So people get all worried when they hear, oh, there's this thing called H5N1 and the cattle has it. Well, birds fly around. We're in the United States. It's springtime. You're going to see more birds flying around and going to pastures and going to different farms, right? And the livestock is going to have interaction with these birds, all right? So there's going to be incidences where you're going to have more avian flu in livestock. This is a common thing. This is not an uncommon thing. If there were several years ago, have been incidences of different types of avian flu, especially H5N1, getting into livestock. About a year ago, there was some stories in the local news about cattle getting it. Okay. Now, people need to keep in mind the research labs do supercharge H5N1 and other types of viruses for influenza. The problematic one is going to be H7N9. So if I heard in the news H7N9, I would start screaming, worry, danger, danger, Will Robinson, right? So, so that's not the case, all right? But H5N1 there's a supercharged H5N1 in the laboratory. So I did a show last night, talking about don't worry about it. This is a zoonotic thing that's natural that will die out. Um, but there are supercharged ones in the laboratory that, if leaked out, could be problematic. That's not really what's happening here. So my take on this is there's going to be a disruption in the milk supply in these local markets in Texas, Michigan, and Kansas. There are two other states that might be problematic. I don't think the testing has been validated yet with the cows, but they did find H5N1 in the milk supply of these cows. Now, this milk gets pasteurized. Most of any pathogen that's in the milk, it would be destroyed through the heating. There's also a process called ultra pasteurization, which is another layer of killing off pathogens. But when a cow is infected, let's say by this avian influenza, or sick for some other reason, those dairy cows usually uh, let down less. So the milk that they produce is less. So even if an infected cow's milk gets into the supply and then it gets pasteurized or ultra pasteurized, the chances of it being problematic for humans is really, really low. Now there's at least one incident, I believe it's in Texas, where the panhandler, I think it's what they call them on the farms, but the ones that are actually working milking the cows, right? because this is automated. One of them did contract H5N1. Now, there's no evidence in this situation where it's human to human transmission. And we have to also remember that these types of influenzas are different than human influenza, and the receptors are different. And so for H5N1 to be super problematic in the human population, it would have to gain function to be able to attach to the upper respiratory receptors versus the lower respiratory receptors. This is the reason why avian flu is hard to contract, because it has to be deeper into the lung. So there has to be a gain of function that takes place. This did not happen. So that's why it's like, yes, it's, it's fodder in the news and people are going to be knee jerking and getting worried. But in this particular incident, I am not worried about this. Well, you're bringing up a great point that, okay, you can have these natural things that are happening that are zoonotic, but now because we went through COVID and now we're in the post-COVID era, there's an aftershock, and our immune systems are weakened by the pathogen and by the way we try to prevent the pathogen, such as vaccines. So we have a large part of the population is having problems with their immune system. Now, there's two main types that are having problems. One is an overactive immune system, where it's more autoimmune related. And then there's another type it's underactive, where it's the VADS, or what I call AIDS-like syndrome. Now, when you have an reacting immune system, for whatever reason, there's a few mechanisms on why this is happening, then you're going to be susceptible to opportunistic infections. That is parasitic, that's bacterial, that's viral. So you're right that you could have a zoonotic situation. And if the farmhands had an immune system that was not working correctly, was downregulated, then their susceptibility to normal bacteria or normal viruses that they would be around on a regular basis on the farm could be very problematic for them. The thing is that people grow their channels through these incidences. All right. And what you find is the ones that really are giving you true information, they get heavily censored. And a lot of times, especially during the COVID era, we lost several channels, the ones that were like trailblazers. And I lost 2 channels on YouTube. They were nuked. And, you have institutions that go after you, you know, if you're a practicing physician, the physician community will go after you. If you're in school, the school will go after you, or the AMA, or some sort of institution, or some sort of body that governs, individuals. Now, I always question people that cover the crisis and that grew channels and didn't lose channels. All right. I was on I don't know if his first name's Steve. I always called him JWTV. All right. All right. All right. Or JW. So JW interviewed me early on. All right. And I will dig up the show and replay it. I begged him to use his channel to warn the public that we were going to lose our constitutional civil liberties, and there was going to be mandates, enforced vaccines, and lockdowns and all this stuff. And the first thing that popped out of his mouth was, "What's going to save people is liquid, colloidal silver." And I at the time I wasn't even selling supplements, but I said that's the wrong philosophy. You can't have a prepping mentality. You have to have an acting mentality. See, I view preppers maybe a little different than most. I view them as almost that they're almost digging in and not being it's not a fully passive strategy, but it's a self-centered, I'll call it a self-centered passive strategy versus versus an active strategy. Well, you could do both, where you can be an active participant to try to save our constitutional freedoms and prepare. Yeah. But if you ask most preppers buy gold, buy guns, buy a Bible, and let the world go up in flames. Very few people are willing to actually be have a similar ethos as, let's say, people that were at Valley Forge during the Revolution. And even during the Revolution, many people at Valley Forge left because it was too damn cold, and they bailed out and abandoned George Washington. So JW, I believe, is a vet. I believe he served in the military. I don't know what branch. I suspect maybe the Navy, but I could be wrong on that. But I think he's a military guy. But but on his show, I've seen his latest stuff. All right, maybe about a week ago, and he's creating a fear. And people buy into it. It's like fear porn. And what happens is that people gravitate to that stuff, waiting for this 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 X in the sky, that's going to happen with the solar eclipse, and that there's going to be some major event. I don't believe it. I just do not believe it. I don't believe that there's going to be a major. I view this as very similar to Y2K back in the day. You remember Y2K, where everybody thought their computers were going to blow up, or people would be stuck in an elevator for 10 years or whatever. And Y2K was a nothing burger. And the same thing's going to happen with this eclipse. It's going to be a nothing burger. Yeah, no, that's a difference. That's different. See, so what happens with JW and other channels like his is that they're mixing things. You can have a catastrophic um, situation where a virus or some other pathogen is released, or some sort of World War III unconventional warfare that's tied to biologics, right? And you don't have to. It's not necessarily going to be coincident with some sort of solar eclipse. It's too. Yeah, so I do think we are marching into unconventional warfare, especially with what's going on in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East. It depends on what kind of pathogen is going to be released. If you're going to be releasing a respiratory infection, then you want to release it where people are close together indoors. It's most likely during the late fall, early winter months. Let it to take hold, and then once people start to get out, then it starts to spread more. And this is part of the reason why October and November were key months for beta coronaviruses, which are respiratory. Now, if you're looking for tick-borne pathogens, then you're talking about something that's more in the spring or the summer, maybe even early fall. So I think it depends on if you're, what kind of pathogenic vector you're dealing with. And there's different types, there's the virus, the bacterial, the parasitic. I am very worried about H7N9, which seems to be the most pathogenic, most worrisome for humans, that's been supercharged in the laboratory for influenza. But it's not just that. I mean, there are many labs across the world that are, and this is why I'm against this gain of function research. There are many labs that are supercharging pathogens to a point where, if they get out by accident or they're used by the military industrial complex, could harm a lot of people, and we're talking about in the millions. Now, uh, the cocktail thesis is dealing with the beta coronaviruses that Barrick's lab and Wuhan's lab played around with, where there are chimeras, where there's this blending between beta coronaviruses, the SARS platform. All right, it's a platform now. So it's the SARS platform with influenza, or a SARS platform with HIV. So these laboratories can literally take aspects to HIV and put it into a large genomic package like a beta coronavirus or the SARS platform, and now turn HIV into something that is aerosolized or something that is respiratory instead of fluid, right? And that's something that would never happen in nature. All right, so we're doing things in the laboratory um, at a point where it's very, very low probability that you would have something naturally happen. Right. But now how the laboratories get around this is they say, well, we're doing research just in case something like this happens, so we're prepared and we have vaccines or some sort of therapy just in case this emerges. Plus, it allows them to publish and get tenure from schools and get notoriety within their discipline. But I think that we are going over the actual true boundaries of what nature really does, and we're making things that could literally destroy humanity. Well, well, academics have a tendency to be insular and not really fully understand what they're doing until after the fact. Case in point, Oppenheimer. Right. Oppenheimer is a classic example. But the thing is that plus it gives them funding from the government, and they get notoriety at their university. They get this funding. It helps their laboratory. So there's a benefit for them to kind of push this strategy. In addition, the military industrial complex wants different types of weapons. There's cyber weapons, there's nuclear weapons, and there's also what I call biologics, the bioweapons. It's kind of dual purpose. This is the problem. Is that it's dual purpose. Nature can create things uh, just through randomness and just an emergent property where a pathogen may take out some livestock, or that livestock passes a pathogen to a human that could cause problems. But we're doing stuff in the lab that the probabilities of this happening in nature are really low. I think the thing is that it, it, it there is a middle ground. There are going to be pathogens that are in the permafrost that get released. All right. But with the Spanish flu, it was only problematic because the populations at the time didn't have an antibody for it. But once the population started to build up antibodies, then it died off. All right. So a a pathogen, one part of the function of it being problematic for humans is, do we have an immune system that can respond to it? And how long does it take for it to boot up? All right. So I view this as kind of like, a little bit in the middle, so. So there's been a report, there's an annual report that gets published by the Cancer Institute in the United States, the American Cancer Association, I think it's called. But and cancers have been going up. It's people are hearing the term turbo cancer. And what turbo cancer basically means is twofold. One, individuals that are they're getting staged faster, meaning that they're going through the stages of cancer faster, like going through stage 1 to stage 2 or stage 2 to stage 3 quicker. In addition, they're getting um, the prevalence is at a younger age. So cancers are becoming more prevalent in the population. They're becoming more prevalent at a younger age, and the speed through the stages are increasing. So this term turbo cancer has been in kind of the layman world, right? Now, I have seen many people complaining about colon cancers, breast cancers, um, and leukemias, um, you know, in a post-COVID era. All right. What is interesting is pre-COVID, cancers were at the was kind of flattening out, or actually on certain cancers, because of detection, was starting to go down in prevalence for new cancers. So so you have this flattening in total cancers in the United States for about 3 years pre-COVID. And then all of a sudden, in the post-COVID era, they start to march up again. Now, the cover, as you were talking about with the whole permafrost stuff, the cover is, well, during COVID, there were less people being screened because people stayed at home. They couldn't. But the thing is you're talking about the screening that they're talking about. We're talking about maybe 1 year. And there's no way that less screening would propagate itself this far out since 2020, because we're most of that lockdown was in 2020 and the very early of 2021. All right. But in the United States, because we're talking about data coming from the United States, most people were roaming around after 20, in the second quarter or third quarter of 2021, at least in New York. I mean, I would assume that was the same in the Midwest, right? So it doesn't it for me, it doesn't seem to truly explain what's going on. Now, when you start, seeing the correlation that, well, there are proteins within the beta coronavirus for SARS-CoV-2 that can affect tumor suppressor genes, that there's integration of the genome of the virus or of the vaccine, and the vaccine and the virus proteins, when they're cleaved, can inhibit the T cell receptor and prevent the CD4 positive cells to be activated what properly with their APCs. What happens is that the immune system is not working correctly. So you may have a proper CD4 positive count, but the effective CD4 is down because it's inhibited by the S1 subunit of the spike that's either in the vaccine or on the virus. So the point here I'm making is that we went through a major event, pathogenic and therapeutic, with the administration of this vaccine that has affected people's immune systems. And so, so that's how I see this. Yeah. So I've been starting recording people audio to help protect their privacy that have long COVID. All right. I've had 2 people talk about it. I've known many more. Actually, I've had 3 people talk about it, but the long COVID nurse talked about it in 2022. But I have been interviewing these people, and they are explaining their experience with long COVID. And um, it's not just taking the vaccine. There was one that didn't take the vaccine and had COVID, I believe it was twice. And then there was another one that took only one shot of the vaccine. I believe it was Moderna. They didn't take the second one. And they contracted it 3 times, the SARS-CoV-2. So and then these symptoms of long COVID, and it's a plethora of symptoms. Some of it is dealing with mental acuity, some of it's dealing with kidney function, some of it's tachycardia, problems with their heart, some of it is sleep disorders, some of it is nervous system disorders, taste, smell, hearing problems. So there's lots of different symptoms of long COVID. and it's all over the map in terms of age group, and also severity. Some people think, oh, it must only happen with severe cases of COVID. No, it could be a mild case of COVID, and they can get long COVID. So, what has I was interviewing this woman that's in the United States, and she taught me something. Actually, you have to listen to a patient. You'll be amazed. The doctors that maybe are listening, listen to patients. They'll actually teach you medicine. And she was trying to find a, a way to treat her symptoms, and she started explaining that she was reading some of these books from MDs, and some of them were from maybe also chiropractic doctors, but that they were explaining that part of the symptoms for long COVID, and I think you'll appreciate this, Eric. Part of the symptoms of long COVID is related to the nervous system. So we have a parasympathetic and a sympathetic nervous system. And so a lot of these patients are having problems with cranial nerves. So we have 12 cranial nerves. One cranial nerve one is for smell, and we have two cranial nerves for taste, right? So and hearing, we have cranial nerve 8. So different nerves control different functions. All right. So along the spine, you have nerves coming off, but you also have cranial nerves that control things. Well, cranial nerve 10, which happens to be the vagal nerve, helps to control the heart. And so if it's not working properly, you will go into default. Well, default is a fast heart, not a slow heart. So there's a disruption, it seems, in the sympathetic nervous system. So there's the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. All right. The the parasympathetic is rest and digest. So it seems as though people that are fearful, and this is where JWTV comes in, if people are in fear on a regular basis, they are more in the sympathetic activation of the nervous system. So when you're activating the sympathetic nervous system on a regular basis, it seems as though it's exacerbating the long COVID symptoms or the syndrome, because it's a myriad of different ailments that patients have, and not all patients are the same. So what this patient did was she tried to calm her system down by doing breathing exercises, by realizing, stay away from negativity, negative people, negative news. Try to be in a more calm state. It's hard, but by doing that, you're activating your parasympathetic more often than your sympathetic. Well, I think that it's more on when people say, "Oh, it's in your head," or "it's psychological," a lot of people think it's not real. I am the opposite. I think that psychological vectors can activate real pathology, right? So, do I think that there's some sort of smoky ink that's floating around that people get into? No, I don't think that. But I do think that if you're watching news that is negative, if you're with people that are constantly negative, if that it's gonna start raising your cortisol levels. And this is why in the early days of long COVID, I I was thinking, and I still think this, that it's an autoimmune disease. It's like lupus. All right. But the thing is that what the the long COVID patient told me, taught me really, was is that it's this overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Now, when this happens, you're going to have more cortisol in your bloodstream. You're going to have pro-inflammatory cytokines, and you're going to have an immune response. So your body is going to be inflamed and attacked. So there's going to be a lupus-like aspect to this with the fatigue and all this. So there isn't, that's why I said that it's not so easy to categorize what long COVID is. It kind of is sort of like lupus. It's kind of sort of like an autoimmune disease. But there's activation of the cranial nerves and this activation of the sympathetic nervous system and this over there's actually there's a pro-inflammatory profile in the serum. So I think that it's just the repeated negativity in modern life, about the market going, down, or their job is at risk, or AI, or the battle between Republicans or Democrats or whatever that activates it with the stock market. As you know, on our last show, I said that there was going to be a bounce off of the 5,250 mark for the S&P 500. That happened today. All right. So people should really listen to your show because they actually may make some money on this. But uh, just like support levels are at the 500 mark for SPY, or the 5,000 if the S&P 500. There's also another support level at 484 for SPY, and 450. My take on this is that it's going to test the 500, most likely be supportive, and then retest the 525 for SPY, and march up to 550 and then reevaluate. So I think there's more upside than downside on this, and it's testing, as I said on your last show. So it's bouncing off, and then it's going to come back up and test again. So that's the stock market, and the oil is going up. So energy costs we're probably going to see in the summer to go up, which will be interesting because then that will make the Federal Reserve potentially raise rates, not cut rates. And Wall Street was thinking that perhaps they were going to cut rates, or they were hoping. All right, so nuclear war. Where do we begin? So Ann Jacobson wrote a book, all right, just recently, and she's on the book circuit right now, and people can just type in her name and look at some of the videos that she's been doing. But she's basically saying that we have a system in place where there's not a lot of checks and balances to make sure that we prevent nuclear war, and that the ones that designed this are dying off. And we don't really have a lot of wise people in the room, in the White House, or at the Pentagon, to be able to navigate through a Cuban Missile Crisis. So, this is a very large topic that we can't, put in 2 minutes here. But the thing is that it's problematic because we don't have really wise people in the room, and that the probability of an accidental miscalculation between Russia and the United States, or the United States and China, is increasing. So well, right. No, we don't. And the thing, and not just that, you're hearing you're hearing the news about AI. And maybe AI should be the non-human actor in this. Well, I remember War Games as a movie in 1980, I believe it came out in 84, maybe it was 85. But with there was the famous movie about Whopper, and they wanted to put the missiles on a computer, and there would be no human intervention. Well, the movie was teaching us, don't do that, because when you do that, there will be no winners in this. Well, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the health supplements that I offer. I have structural nano silver, I have C60, and I have a plethora of other supplements that'll help to boost up your immune system.